At my husband Frederick's funeral, I reached for a seat in the front row, seeking solace next to my son. But his wife, Serena, stood abruptly, blocking me. "That seat is for family," she declared. "You were his wife." As whispers filled the church, I simply smiled, a secret blooming in my heart. You see, Frederick knew this would happen. Tomorrow, everything changes. Stay with me, like, share, and tell me where you're listening from. The air in the church was thick with the scent of lilies and the hushed murmurs of grief. Each eulogy, each hymn, felt like another nail in the coffin of my soul. Frederick was gone. 45 years of shared laughter, quiet companionship, and unwavering love had ended, leaving behind a void so profound it felt physical. My hand instinctively reached for the empty space beside me, a phantom limb seeking its mate. The sheer weight of his absence pressed down, making it hard to breathe, hard to even process the reality of this final farewell. As the casket was slowly lowered, a deep tremor ran through me. I needed my son, Daniel. I needed to feel the warmth of his presence, to share this overwhelming grief, to anchor myself in the last remaining piece of my immediate family. With a heavy heart, I began to shuffle toward the front row, where Daniel sat, his shoulders hunched, his head bowed. My gaze was fixed on him, a silent plea for comfort, a desperate need for a shared embrace in this moment of utter desolation. But my path was abruptly, shockingly, blocked. Serena, Daniel's wife, rose from her seat with a decisive, almost theatrical movement. Her sleek black dress seemed to absorb the light, her expression utterly devoid of the shared sorrow that permeated the room. She stood directly in front of the empty seat next to Daniel, her body a rigid barrier. "That seat," she stated, her voice carrying a chilling clarity in the hushed church, "is reserved for family." My breath hitched. The words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding, slicing through the veil of my grief. I looked at her, then at the empty chair, then back at her, confusion warring with a burgeoning dread. Did she not see me? Did she not understand? Serena's eyes, cold and unflinching, met mine. There was no mist of sympathy, no flicker of understanding. Instead, a thinly veiled triumph played at the corners of her lips. She leaned in slightly, as if to impart a confidential secret. Though her words were meant for all within earshot, "You were his wife, Eleanor. This chair is for the new head of the household, for the one who will carry on his legacy." As if to punctuate her cruel decree, she deliberately, almost ceremoniously, placed her designer handbag onto the plush velvet cushion of the empty seat, effectively staking her claim. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the rustle of programs and a sudden cascade of whispers. I felt the prickle of eyes on me, felt the judgment and the pity. Every nerve ending screamed, demanding I react, demand an explanation, demand Daniel's intervention. But Daniel remained silent. His head stayed bowed, his hands clasped tightly, a statue of inaction. He offered no protest, no glance of apology, no gesture of comfort. His silence was a betrayal far deeper than Serena's cutting words, a stark confirmation of my new, diminished status. Alone, publicly humiliated, I could do nothing but retreat, my heart shattering into a million pieces. I found a seat in the row behind, the distance feeling like an unbridgeable chasm. This wasn't an isolated incident, though. Serena had perfected the art of exclusion over the years, a slow, insidious campaign that had chipped away at my place in Daniel's life. It began subtly, with missed invitations to family dinners she hosted, or vague excuses about private family time. Then it escalated to overt slights. My grandchildren's birthday parties where I was relegated to the furthest corner. My opinions dismissed. My presence treated as an inconvenience. I recalled the Christmas 3 years ago, when she'd accidentally forgotten to put my name on the family gift exchange list, leaving me empty-handed while everyone else unwrapped their presents. Frederick had always been my shield, my staunch defender. He'd brush off her behavior with a tolerant smile. "Oh, Serena just feels a bit insecure, dear. She's new to our way of doing things." His gentle reassurances, meant to comfort me, now felt like a poignant echo in the empty chambers of my memory. He had always been there to smooth things over, to remind me of my rightful place. Now, he was gone, and Serena saw her chance to erase me completely. The post-funeral gathering was held at our home, the very house Frederick and I had built together, filled with a lifetime of memories. Yet, as I stepped through the front door, it felt alien, stolen. Serena was already in full command, moving through the rooms with an air of proprietorship that chilled me to the bone. She directed staff, instructing them on where to place trays of canapés and how to refill champagne flutes. She accepted condolences from guests with a regal nod, a practiced mournfulness on her face, as if she, not I, were the primary widow. She accepted their expressions of sympathy, the gentle hugs meant for me, her hand often resting on Daniel's arm, subtly reinforcing their united front. I watched her from the periphery, a ghost in my own home, clutching a teacup I couldn't bring myself to drink from. Every time I tried to speak to an old friend, Serena would somehow materialize, drawing them into her orbit, monopolizing the conversation, subtly diverting their attention from me. Eventually, Daniel approached me. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, but his expression was distant, almost detached. "Are you holding up okay, Mother?" he asked, his voice low, his question feeling more like an obligation than genuine concern. Before I could even formulate a coherent answer, Serena appeared at his side, her hand on his elbow. "Darling, Mrs. Albright is waiting to speak with you," she purred, gently but firmly pulling him away. He offered me a fleeting, apologetic glance before disappearing into the crowd with her. A profound loneliness settled over me, heavier than any grief. I was adrift, an outcast in the very place that should have offered solace. My own son, my flesh and blood, stood by while his wife dismantled my dignity piece by painful piece. Yet, a peculiar sensation began to stir within me, a tiny ember of defiance beneath the ashes of my sorrow. A faint, secret smile touched my lips, unseen by anyone in the bustling room. Frederick, my clever, thoughtful Frederick, had seen this coming. He had known, better than anyone, the depths of Serena's ambition and her capacity for cruelty. Let her play lady of the manor for now, I thought, the warmth of that secret spreading through my veins. Let her bask in this fleeting illusion of power. Tomorrow would bring the reading of the will. The night after Frederick's funeral was a cruel mockery of rest. Sleep refused to claim me, leaving me adrift in the vast, echoing silence of our Victorian home on Maple Street. I wandered from room to room, a phantom in my own life, tracing the familiar lines of furniture, touching the worn velvet of an armchair, the smooth surface of the grand piano. Each object, each corner, was steeped in Frederick, in us. This house wasn't merely bricks and mortar. It was the repository of our shared dream, the tangible testament to 45 years of building a life together. I remembered the day we first saw it, a dilapidated beauty with peeling paint and overgrown gardens. Frederick, then a strapping young man with dreams in his eyes, had taken my hand and declared, "Ellie, this is it. This is where we'll build our future." And we had. We'd poured our love, our sweat, and our meager savings into its restoration. I could almost hear the echo of Frederick's hammer as he built the sprawling porch, a perfect spot for morning coffee and evening stargazing. I saw him, paintbrush in hand, meticulously painting the nursery for Daniel, his face alight with paternal pride. Every creak of the floorboards, every draft from the old windows, held a memory, a whisper of our shared history. This house was a part of me, as much as Frederick was. The first rays of dawn were just beginning to filter through the lace curtains when Serena appeared. She wasn't just early. She was impeccably, alarmingly, early, as if she had been waiting for the exact moment of first light to strike. Dressed in a sleek charcoal pantsuit, tailored to perfection, she looked ready for a corporate takeover, not a morning after a funeral. She carried a small, expensive-looking leather brief. She found me in the kitchen, staring blankly at the coffee maker. "Eleanor," she began, her voice a practiced blend of false concern and steely resolve. "Thomas and I were talking last night. We think it might be best if you start considering other living arrangements." My hand, poised to press the on button for the coffee, froze. I turned slowly to face her, my mind still thick with the haze of sleepless grief. "Other living arrangements?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash. She nodded, a sympathetic furrow creasing her brow, but her eyes remained cold. "Yes, dear. This house is simply enormous for one person. It requires so much upkeep. We were looking into some lovely assisted living communities nearby. They offer wonderful amenities, and you'd have company your own age. It would be much safer, too, for someone your age." The implied message hung heavy in the air. You are old, you are fragile, and you are no longer capable of managing your own life, let alone this grand house. The audacity of her suggestion, coming so swiftly on the heels of Frederick's death, was breathtaking. But it wasn't surprising. This was merely the latest, most blatant move in Serena's long-standing campaign to marginalize me. I remembered how, from the moment Daniel first married her, she had systematically tried to erase me from their family unit. Invitations to family gatherings were lost in the mail, or I was only informed at the last minute. She'd subtly, and not so subtly, begun to spread doubts about my memory, my decisions, even my mental capacity to Daniel. "Mother seems a little confused today, doesn't she, Daniel?" she would say, loud enough for me to hear. This wasn't the first time she'd tried to push me into assisted living either. After Frederick's heart diagnosis a few years back, Serena had launched a full-scale assault, presenting us with brochures for various facilities. Frederick had shut her down immediately, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. "Ellie and I are staying right here, Serena. This is our home. We built it, and we'll live out our days in it." His words had been a firm, protective shield. Now, that shield was gone, and she was seizing her opportunity. A slow, simmering anger began to replace the numbness of my grief. It was a rare emotion for me, usually quickly subdued by Frederick's calm presence, but now it flared, hot and insistent. My eyes met hers, and for the first time, I didn't back down. "This," I stated, my voice surprisingly steady, "is my home, Serena. Frederick and I built it together, brick by brick, memory by memory. I'm not going anywhere." A flicker of annoyance crossed Serena's perfectly composed face. Her facade of false concern cracked, revealing the hard edge beneath. "Well," she sighed, a dismissive wave of her hand, "perhaps we can discuss it more thoroughly after the will reading this afternoon. I'm sure things will become much clearer then." Her tone implied that the will would inevitably confirm her assumptions, cementing her authority and my imminent departure. She clearly believed the house would pass directly to Daniel, and thus, to her. Her words, however, only solidified the quiet certainty growing within me. Frederick. My clever, foresightful Frederick. I remembered him, about 6 months ago, telling me he had a sudden urge to visit his lawyer, Mr. Henderson. He had been unusually vague about the details, just a casual mention over dinner, but now it clicked into place. He hadn't been vague. He had been secretive, purposeful. He had been ensuring my protection, anticipating this very moment, this very battle. "Just wait, Ellie," I could almost hear him say, his voice a gentle murmur in my ear. "Just wait." Just then, Daniel shuffled down the stairs, his eyes still heavy from lack of sleep. He seemed smaller, paler, without Frederick's anchoring presence. He approached me hesitantly. "Mom," he mumbled, avoiding my gaze, "about yesterday, at the funeral." "I'm sorry," Violet just thought. He trailed off, unable to complete the flimsy excuse, unwilling to fully acknowledge the hurt he had allowed. Violet was one of Serena's friends, another puppet in her game. I cut him off, my voice calm but firm. We will discuss any changes regarding the house after the will reading, Daniel. I looked directly into his eyes, hoping to convey some of the hurt, some of the truth. But his gaze skittered away, already searching for an escape. Serena, having overheard, chirped, "Daniel, darling, can you help me with these documents?" Her voice was sweet, inviting. Without a moment's hesitation, without another word or glance my way, Daniel turned and walked straight to her, falling back into her orbit, her control. My heart, already heavy with grief, felt another pang. It was a familiar ache, seeing Daniel so easily swayed, so willingly led. My son, so trusting, so blind. And then, a different kind of strength began to emerge, a quiet resolve, born from Frederick's unwavering wisdom. "Just wait, Ellie. Just wait." He knew. He always knew. And now, so did I. The heavy oak door of Mr. Albright's law office felt like a portal to a different era. The waiting room, with its worn leather chairs, mahogany paneling, and the faint scent of old paper, was a time capsule, unchanged for as long as I could remember. It was the same office Frederick had used for decades, a bastion of stability in a world that suddenly felt terribly uncertain. As I settled into a chair, the familiar surroundings brought a strange sense of calm. Here, among these old walls, I felt an impending sense of truth, a reckoning that was long overdue. Moments later, the door opened again, and Frederick's sister, Beatrice, bustled in. Her eyes, still red-rimmed from grief, found mine, and she immediately crossed the room. "Eleanor, darling," she murmured, enveloping me in a warm, comforting hug. Her embrace was genuine, heartfelt, and for a brief moment, the grief felt a little less suffocating. Beatrice had always seen through Serena's carefully constructed facade, having never been particularly fond of her calculating nature. Her support, though silent, spoke volumes. Just as the receptionist announced our appointment, Daniel and Serena made their entrance. Serena, predictably, was dressed in a sharp designer suit. Her hair pulled back in a severe, efficient ponytail. She carried a sleek leather notebook, a pen poised above its pristine pages, looking less like a grieving daughter-in-law and more like a CEO ready to close a major business merger. Daniel, beside her, looked pale and somewhat bewildered, a stark contrast to his wife's aggressive composure. Mr. Albright, a kind-faced man whose spectacles often slid down his nose, greeted us with a somber nod. He cleared his throat and began, his voice calm and measured. "We are here today to read the last will and testament of Frederick Montgomery. I should note, for the record, that Mr. Montgomery made some significant changes to this document approximately 6 months ago. At that time, he was, in my professional opinion, of sound mind and body, fully aware of his decisions and their implications. I saw it, a subtle shift." Serena's poised pen paused mid-air above her notebook. Her head lifted fractionally, and she shared a quick, furtive glance with Daniel. A silent exchange that spoke volumes about their own assumptions regarding Frederick's final wishes. I felt a small, inward smile. Frederick, always one step ahead. Mr. Albright continued, detailing the initial provisions. To his beloved sister, Beatrice Eleanor Montgomery, Frederick leaves his collection of first-edition classic novels, along with a sum of $50,000. Beatrice gasped softly, tears welling in her eyes, a mixture of surprise and gratitude. Then came Daniel's turn. To his son, Daniel Frederick Montgomery, Frederick bequeaths his vintage car collection, his complete set of woodworking tools, and the family fishing cabin at Lake Tahoe. Daniel nodded, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes, as if these were merely appetizers before the main course. Additionally, Mr. Albright added, Daniel will receive a sum of $200,000, held in a trust, to be distributed in quarterly payments over a period of 5 years. Serena's composure shattered. Her pen clattered onto the table, A trust? She interjected, her voice sharp, cutting through the lawyer's measured tone. Why a trust? That's ridiculous. Daniel needs a lump sum. He has business ventures, investments that require immediate capital. She glared at Mr. Albright, as if he were personally responsible for this perceived slight. This is absurd. He should have direct access to his inheritance. Mr. Albright merely pushed his spectacles further up his nose. Frederick explicitly instructed that the funds be dispersed in this manner. Mrs. Montgomery. His reasons were clearly stated in a separate memorandum, which I am not at liberty to disclose at this time. The terms are non-negotiable. His tone was firm, brooking no argument. Serena sank back in her chair, a furious scowl on her face, but she held her tongue, for now. The room grew quiet once more, pregnant with anticipation. Mr. Albright then turned his gaze towards me, and finally, to his cherished wife, Eleanor Grace Montgomery. Frederick leaves their family home at 1423 Maple Street, free and clear of all encumbrances. A wave of relief washed over me. The house was mine. My home. Furthermore, he continued, Eleanor will receive $1 million from Frederick's life insurance policy, his entire investment portfolio, and full, unconditional ownership of Montgomery Consulting Group. A collective gasp filled the room. Serena's jaw dropped, her perfectly made-up face contorting in disbelief. What? She sputtered. Barely coherent. This must be a mistake. Frederick always intended for Daniel to take over the business. It was his life's work, his legacy. She pounded her fist lightly on the table, her indignation palpable. Mr. Albright, unflustered, merely looked over the documents again. Frederick's instructions were exceptionally clear, Mrs. Montgomery. He expressed no confusion or hesitation on this matter. His intent was explicit. Serena turned her fury on me, her eyes blazing. But Eleanor knows nothing about running a consulting firm. She's just a housewife. What could she possibly do with a business like that? The contempt in her voice was a physical blow, meant to diminish and discredit me entirely. I straightened my posture, a quiet strength rising within me. The memory of Frederick's secret smile, his foresight, gave me courage. Just a housewife? I repeated softly, letting the words hang in the air. Serena, I worked alongside Frederick for 20 years before I retired. I helped him build that company from our garage. I managed the books, handled client relations, drafted proposals, and often closed deals. I was his partner in every sense of the word. I know Montgomery Consulting Group inside and out. Serena, speechless for once, turned a bewildered, furious gaze to Daniel. Her voice, when it came, was laced with venomous incredulity. Are you going to let this happen, Daniel? Your father's company, your inheritance, going to her? I watched Daniel, frozen, caught between his wife's fury and the undeniable truth laid bare before him. The silence was agonizing. Pregnant with the weight of unspoken resentments and undeniable revelations, the tension in the room was suffocating. Serena's furious glare bored into me, demanding a response, demanding an explanation I wasn't obligated to provide. Daniel, still reeling from the revelation of my active role in the family business, looked utterly lost. It was into this fraught silence that Mr. Albright cleared his throat again, a deliberate, almost theatrical sound. He picked up a thick, cream-colored envelope from his desk. Frederick also included a personal letter to be read aloud, he announced, his gaze sweeping across the room. My heart gave a lurch. A letter from Frederick. His last words. His final message to us all. Mr. Albright carefully slid open the envelope and began to read, his voice taking on a softer, more intimate tone. To my dearest Eleanor, my Ellie, he began, and I felt a warmth spread through me, a familiar comfort in his words. You have been my rock, my confidant, my partner in everything. The true strength behind my success was always your unwavering belief, your sharp mind, and your tireless dedication. You helped me build Montgomery Consulting Group from a dream in our garage into the thriving enterprise it became. This company, our home, and my legacy are rightfully yours, to nurture and grow as you see fit." A soft sniffle came from Beatrice, who reached over to squeeze my hand. Serena, however, sat rigid, her face a mask of barely suppressed rage. Mr. Albright continued, his voice now tinged with a delicate sadness. "To my son, Daniel, I love you deeply. You are my only child, and I have always been immensely proud of the man you've become. However, I have observed with growing concern your judgment, particularly in allowing others to come between you and your mother. It pains me to see the distance that has grown, encouraged by influences that do not have your best interests, or your mother's, at heart." Daniel flinched, his head snapping up to stare at Mr. Albright, then quickly to me, his eyes wide with a mixture of shame and dawning realization. The lawyer paused, taking a sip of water, and then his voice hardened slightly as he addressed the final recipient. "And to Serena, I have, over the years, observed your treatment of Ellen, your calculated attempts to isolate her, to diminish her role in this family, and to undermine her confidence have not gone unnoticed. I have witnessed your continuous efforts to control Daniel and to strip Ellen of her rightful place." Serena's face, which had slowly been draining of color, now turned an ashen gray. Her carefully constructed facade cracked entirely, revealing the raw, undisguised hatred simmering beneath. Her eyes narrowed, blazing with a cold fire as she stared directly at me. "Therefore, Mr. Albright read, his voice resolute. "The structure of this will is specifically designed to protect Ellen from further manipulation and to ensure that Daniel's inheritance, while substantial, remains yours, protected from outside influence." Serena lunged forward, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You did this," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper, aimed solely at me. "You manipulated a dying man. You preyed on his weakness." I met her gaze calmly, a profound sense of peace settling over me. "Frederick made his own decisions." "Serena," I asserted, my voice steady, betraying none of the tremor I felt deep inside. "He always did." Before Serena could launch into another tirade, Mr. Albright raised a hand, stopping her short. "There is one final provision, Mrs. Montgomery, which directly concerns you and Daniel." He looked at Daniel, who now appeared utterly bewildered. "Frederick stipulated that if Daniel and Serena wished to remain in the Montgomery home at 1423 Maple Street, they must pay fair market rent to Eleanor, commencing immediately. Alternatively, you are required to vacate the premises within 30 days from the date of this reading." Serena gasped, her eyes bulging. This was the final blow. She stood abruptly, her chair toppling over with a crash that echoed through the quiet office. "This is outrageous!" she shrieked, her voice shrill with fury. "I will contest this will. This is clearly the work of a senile old man, manipulated by a vindictive woman." Mr. Albright, unperturbed, adjusted his glasses. "I assure you, Mrs. Montgomery, this will is, as we say in the legal profession, contest-proof." Frederick was meticulous. Not only did he establish his sound mental and physical state with multiple medical evaluations and independent witnesses, but he also provided extensive documentation. He documented your behavior over the past several years, Mrs. Montgomery. This includes detailed notes, sworn affidavits from staff, and, he paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in, recordings of conversations where you explicitly discussed plans to have Eleanor declared incompetent, to force her into assisted living, and to seize control of her assets. The words hung in the air, cold and damning. Daniel stared at Serena, his face a canvas of utter shock and betrayal. He recorded conversations?" he stammered, his voice barely a whisper, turning to Mr. Albright as if seeking a lifeline from this devastating truth. Mr. Albright nodded gravely. "Frederick was thorough, Daniel. He anticipated such a reaction and took every precaution, The color drained from Daniel's face. He looked at Serena, then back at me, his eyes filled with a raw, wounded confusion. His shoulders slumped. I think we should go, he mumbled to Serena, his voice devoid of its usual deference to her. Then, he turned to me, his gaze clouded with unshed tears. Mom, I don't know what to say. A wave of profound sadness washed over me, seeing my son so broken, so clearly hurt by the woman he had chosen. But beneath it, a surge of Frederick's love, his fierce protection. You don't need to say anything right now, Daniel, I said softly, my voice filled with a mother's gentle compassion. Take some time to process everything. Just think. As Daniel, looking utterly devastated, led a seething, silent Serena out of the office. Beatrice moved to my side, her hand resting on my arm. Frederick always did think of everything, didn't he, Ellie? She whispered, her eyes filled with understanding. Tears, finally, welled in my eyes. Not tears of sorrow, but of gratitude, of profound love. This was Frederick's last act, a final, powerful testament to his unwavering love and his enduring commitment to me. His wisdom, his foresight, had shielded me even from beyond the grave. Returning home after the will reading was like stepping into a battleground. Drawers in the living room were pulled open, their contents strewn carelessly. A cherished porcelain figurine Frederick had given me was missing from the mantelpiece. In the study, papers were scattered, and the family photo album lay abandoned on the floor, its pages ripped. Serena's rage, evidently, had found a destructive outlet. A cold knot of anger tightened in my stomach. Before I could even begin to process the damage, Daniel burst through the front door, his face flushed, his eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and confusion. He found me standing amidst the disarray, surveying the wreckage. How could you do this to me? He demanded, his voice raw and accusatory. How could you turn Dad against me? Against Serena? You manipulated him, didn't you? You fed him lies. His words stung, cutting deep, even after hearing Frederick's letter, even after the lawyer's undeniable evidence. Daniel still clung to Serena's narrative, still believed her insidious falsehoods. A profound sadness washed over me, a heavy wave of disappointment that my son could still be so blind. Daniel, I said softly, my voice laced with grief. When have I ever lied to you? He scoffed, a bitter, dismissive sound. You're manipulative in your own quiet way, Mother. You've always resented Serena, haven't you? Because she took your place. She became the most important woman in my life. And you couldn't stand it. I stared at him, utterly incredulous, and a hollow, humorless laugh escaped my lips. Took my place? I repeated, shaking my head. Daniel, all I ever wanted was basic respect. All I wanted was to be included in my own family. I never sought to be the most important woman in your life. I was your mother. That was enough. He paced frantically, running a hand through his hair. But the business, Mom. I deserved the business. I've been working there for 5 years as vice president. My heart ached for him, for his misplaced sense of entitlement, for the reality he refused to acknowledge. Daniel, I said gently, Frederick created that vice president position for you, out of love. He created it because you couldn't hold down a job anywhere else. He saw you struggling, and he wanted to give you stability, a purpose, a place in the family without overwhelming you. His face contorted, twisting with a renewed bitterness. You're just a bitter old woman, aren't you? Trying to take everything for yourself now that Dad's gone. His words, so cruelly reminiscent of Serena's accusations, finally ignited a spark of resolve within me. This had gone on long enough. I walked over to Frederick's study, the same study where he had so meticulously gathered his evidence. From a hidden compartment in his desk, I retrieved a thick, unmarked folder. I laid it on the antique mahogany, opening it to reveal a trove of damning proof. "Bitter old woman?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Let's see what Frederick, your father, truly thought." I showed him a series of carefully dated photographs. Serena, rifling through my personal papers in the den, her expression conspiratorial. Emails between Serena and her friend Violet, discussing strategies to get me into an assisted living facility, complete with fabricated incidents of supposed forgetfulness. A meticulously kept log, detailing every family event from which I had been subtly or overtly excluded. Daniel's eyes widened, scanning the evidence, his face gradually draining of color. He looked up, bewildered. This can't be real." Without a word, I reached for a small, portable digital recorder I had found tucked away in the folder. I pressed play. Frederick's voice, clear and strong, filled the room, introducing the date and time. Then, Serena's voice, unmistakable, sharp, and chillingly devoid of emotion. "I can't wait until Frederick is gone," she purred, her voice dripping with avarice. "Ellen won't know what hit her. The house, the money, everything will be ours. Daniel is so easily swayed, he'll believe anything I tell him." The recording ended, leaving a profound, agonizing silence in its wake. Daniel stared at the small device, then at the photographs, then back at me, his face a canvas of horror and disbelief. She wouldn't," he stammered, his voice weak, still grasping at straws of denial. This is manipulated." I shook my head, my eyes meeting his. "This is your wife, Daniel. Your father recorded this, knowing what she was capable of." I pressed play again, to another recording from a different date. Serena's voice, this time on the phone, distinctly saying, "Honestly, Daniel is so gullible. He buys every word I say. It's almost too easy." Daniel flinched as if physically struck. The sound of his wife calling him gullible was a humiliation far greater than any I had endured. I switched off the recorder. Frederick hoped. "Daniel," I explained, my voice softening. He truly hoped that Serena would change. He hoped that you would eventually see the truth yourself. But he also knew, deep down, that he had to protect me, just in case you didn't. Daniel sank onto a nearby armchair, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking. "Why, Mom?" he mumbled, his voice muffled by his hands. "Why didn't you ever say anything? Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at my son, tears pricking my own eyes. "Would you have believed me, Daniel?" I asked. The question hanging heavy in the air between us, a truth he couldn't deny. Just then, the front door burst open again. Serena, having clearly forgotten something or perhaps drawn back by an inexplicable pull, strode in, her fury still palpable. Her eyes immediately landed on the open folder, the scattered photos, the recorder, her face twisted further. "What is this?" she shrieked, frantic. "You fabricated all of this. You're trying to turn him against me. These are lies." She lunged forward, trying to snatch the folder, but I quickly pulled it away. Daniel, who had lifted his head, finally looked at her, truly looked at her. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of steel in his gaze, a backbone I hadn't seen in years. "Stop it, Serena," he said, his voice quiet but firm, startling both of us. "Stop it. I heard your voice on those recordings. And my mother has never been anything but honest with me." Serena froze, her mouth agape. Her eyes darted between Daniel and me, a desperate wildness in their depths. "So," she spat, her voice laced with venom, "you're choosing her over me? Your pathetic mother over your wife?" Daniel stood up, slowly, deliberately. His posture was straighter, his resolve clear. "I'm choosing the truth, Serena," he said, his voice unwavering. "And I'm finally seeing it clearly." With a guttural cry of rage, Serena spun around, stormed out of the house, and slammed the front door shut with such force that the old Victorian vibrated. The ensuing silence was profound, broken only by Daniel's ragged breaths. He turned to me, his eyes brimming with shame and regret. "Mom," he whispered, "I am so sorry. I was so blind, so utterly blind." I walked over to him, my own tears finally falling. I gently took his hand, squeezing it. "It's okay, Daniel," I murmured, a profound sense of relief washing over me. "It's okay. We can heal this, my son. We can finally heal." The path ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in years, I felt a fragile hope bloom in my heart. A hope for a family reunited. A legacy restored. The aftermath of the will reading and Daniel's confrontation with Serena brought a series of profound aftershocks that rippled through our lives. Serena, predictably, had not returned to the house, choosing instead to stay with her sister, further widening the already gaping fracture in their marriage. Daniel, in a gesture that was both a penance and a plea for reconciliation, moved his belongings into the guest bedroom downstairs, leaving the master suite, where he had lived with Serena, untouched and silent. While I found a strange kind of vindication in Serena's unmasking, there was no joy in witnessing Daniel's pain. He was my son, and the realization of his wife's deceit and his own prolonged blindness weighed heavily on him. After all, Serena had been his choice, a choice he had staunchly defended for years, even at my expense. One quiet afternoon, I was tending to Frederick's beloved rose garden, a therapeutic ritual I had returned to since his passing. Daniel joined me on the back porch, settling onto the swing Frederick had built. He watched me prune the thorny stems for a long time before he spoke. "You know, Mom," he began, his voice soft, contemplative. I think I always knew on some level about Serena, about her manipulation." He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. I chose to ignore it. It was easier, I guess. Easier than confronting her. Easier than admitting I'd made a mistake. His honesty was a raw, painful gift. It confirmed what Frederick had suspected, and what I, deep down, had feared. "It's hard to face uncomfortable truths, Daniel," I replied, snipping a dead rosebud. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "She's already contacted a lawyer," he revealed, his voice laced with a bitter humor, demanding a settlement. "Half of my inheritance, of course." He managed a wry smile. "But Dad really did think of everything." Mr. Albright explained that the trust he set up for me was specifically designed to protect my inheritance from divorce settlements. "She can't touch it." Frederick, even in death, was still shielding his son. "She's been calling everyone," Daniel continued, his eyes darkening. "Family, colleagues, mutual friends, spinning a whole new narrative. That I abandoned her. That you brainwashed me. That I'm suddenly too old-fashioned for her modern sensibilities." He shook his head. "It's amazing. Even now, she can't just admit defeat. She has to be the victim." His words painted a vivid picture of Serena's relentless need for control, her inability to accept responsibility. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion, his gaze fixed on the wilting petals of a discarded rose. "I'm so incredibly sorry for letting her isolate you, for believing her lies, for not being there for you. I was a terrible son." I knelt beside him, placing a hand on his arm. "No, Daniel," I reassured him gently. "You weren't a terrible son. You were just misguided. You were caught in a web, and it's hard to see clearly when you're caught." He looked up at me, his eyes full of anguish. "I don't know what to do now. Where do I go?" He seemed to be weighing the possibility of leaving, perhaps finding a place of his own. "Daniel," I said, my voice firm but warm, "this house has plenty of room for both of us. And more importantly, this is your home, too. It always has been. Frederick and I built it for our family, and that includes you. Stay as long as you need." His shoulders relaxed, a visible weight lifting from him. A few days later, a cheerful commotion erupted from the front door. Chloe and Leo, Daniel's children, my grandchildren, arrived for the weekend. They hadn't visited in months, a clear consequence of Serena's constant interference and carefully curated excuses. Their laughter, light and unburdened, was a balm to the strained atmosphere in the house. As I helped Chloe unpack in her familiar sun-drenched room, she looked up at me, her young eyes remarkably perceptive. "Grandma," she asked, her brow furrowed. "Serena told me you were getting rid of our rooms, and that you didn't want us to visit anymore." Her voice held a hint of accusation, but also a deeper curiosity. My heart ached at the blatant lies Serena had fed them. "No, darling," I said, gently smoothing her hair. "That's not true at all. These rooms are always here for you. And I always want you to visit." I paused, choosing my words carefully. Serena and I just had different ideas about family. Sometimes. "Was Serena always mean to you, Grandma?" Chloe pressed, her young mind piecing together fragmented memories. "She always wanted to be the most important person, didn't she?" I smiled sadly. Children, with their pure hearts, often saw the truth adults tried to obscure. She had her own struggles. "Sweetie," I replied, opting for grace over bitterness. "But what matters is that we're all here now." Later that evening, as we sat around the kitchen table, sharing a simple dinner of pizza and playing a boisterous round of Frederick's old board games, I watched Daniel. He was laughing freely, truly laughing, for the first time in what felt like years. Chloe and Leo, beaming with joy, were completely engrossed in the game, their faces alight with the simple pleasure of being together. It was a reconnection, a healing, unfolding before my eyes, in ways I hadn't dared to hope for. After the children were asleep, Daniel joined me on the porch again. The night air was cool, the crickets chirping a rhythmic lullaby. He reached for my hand, his grip firm. "Mom," he said, his voice soft but resolute. "I want to fix this. I want to be the son Dad would be proud of." I squeezed his hand back, tears blurring my vision. "Frederick would have been so proud." "You already are, Daniel," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "You already are." The journey was far from over, but the first steps toward a restored family, a renewed legacy, had been taken. 6 months after Frederick's death, the house on Maple Street began to breathe anew. It was a slow, deliberate process, not a frantic overhaul. I started with the kitchen, painting the walls a calming sage green, a shade I had always loved, but Frederick, with his penchant for bold blues, had never quite agreed to. The heavy, formal drapes in the living room, which had always felt a little too stiff, were replaced with lighter, airy linen, allowing the sunlight to stream in. These weren't grand renovations, but small, personal touches that began to truly make the house feel like mine, infused with my own aesthetic. Daniel, along with Chloe and Leo, eager to help, embraced these changes. What might have been mundane chores transformed into joyful family projects. Daniel painstakingly sanded down the old dining table, while Chloe and Leo, giggling, helped me choose new throw pillows for the sofa. One afternoon, as we were hanging the new, flowing curtains, Daniel paused, stepping back to admire our work. "You know, Mom," he chuckled, a genuine warmth in his voice. "Dad would have absolutely hated these curtains. He'd probably call them wispy or unsubstantial." I laughed, a full, unrestrained sound that filled the room. "He would have," I agreed fondly, "a wonderful man with terrible taste in drapery." The shared memory, now tinged with humor rather than sorrow, was a comforting balm. Meanwhile, Daniel's divorce from Serena unfolded in a predictable storm of accusations and legal maneuvers. Serena, true to form, tried every trick in the book, attempting to claim a significant portion of his inheritance. But Frederick's meticulous planning, his foresight in establishing the trust, became Daniel's impenetrable shield. The judge, presented with Frederick's carefully documented evidence and Serena's increasingly fabricated grievances, saw through her machinations. Her attempts to portray herself as a wronged wife were systematically dismantled. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, as I was pruning the last of the summer roses in the garden, a shadow fell over me. I looked up to see Serena standing at the edge of the patio, an unexpected apparition. She looked polished, as always, in a perfectly tailored tweed suit. But there was a tension around her eyes, a rigidity in her posture that betrayed her composure. "So," she began, her voice brittle, "you're still here. Playing the grieving widow. The innocent victim." She swept a dismissive hand across the expanse of the garden. "And you have everything. The house, the money, the business, everything that should have been ours." Her eyes still held that hungry, covetous glint. "You really think you can just take it all, don't you? After everything." I straightened, wiping my gloved hands on my apron. My heart pounded, but my voice remained calm, steady. "Serena," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching, "this house was never yours. It was Frederick's and mine. And as for taking everything, I am merely honoring Frederick's last wishes." I paused, letting my words sink in. "And don't forget, Serena. Frederick documented more than just the will. He documented every threat you made, every plan to have me declared incompetent. He was very thorough." Her eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, widened slightly. The ghost of her defeat in Mr. Albright's office flickered across her face. The realization that my quiet strength was now backed by an unassailable truth settled upon her. She stared at me for a long moment, defeated, finally understanding the futility of her accusations. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her perfect posture doing little to hide the slump of her shoulders. She never returned. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Serena received a fair, but significantly reduced settlement, a fraction of what she had initially demanded. Soon after, I heard through Beatrice that she had moved to Phoenix, seeking, I hoped, a new beginning far from the Montgomery family she had tried so hard to dismantle. On the 1-year anniversary of Frederick's death, I hosted a family dinner. It wasn't a somber remembrance, but a quiet celebration of life, of family, of resilience. Beatrice was there, her laughter bright and infectious. Daniel, with Chloe and Leo, radiating a newfound peace. And, surprisingly, Sarah, Daniel's ex-wife and the children's mother, joined us. A testament to Daniel's efforts to rebuild bridges and create a truly healthy family environment. I sat at the head of the dining table, Frederick's customary spot, a place I had rarely occupied when he was alive. Tonight, it felt right. It felt like where I belonged. Toasts were made, not just to Frederick's memory, but to his wisdom, his enduring protection, and his incredible foresight. We remembered his humor, his kindness, his stubbornness, and his unwavering love. I raised my glass, looking around at the faces of my family, truly seeing them, connected and whole again. A profound sense of gratitude washed over me. Frederick, my brilliant Frederick, had not just protected me from financial ruin or emotional manipulation. He had, in his own quiet, powerful way, made sure we'd find our way back to each other. He had orchestrated our healing, even from beyond the grave. Later, alone in the quiet house, the soft glow of the lamps casting long shadows, I walked through the rooms. The sage-green kitchen, the light-filled living room, the comforting scent of the roses blooming outside. This home, now truly mine, was still filled with Frederick's enduring presence, not as a ghost of the past, but as a warm, protective spirit woven into every detail. I whispered a heartfelt thanks to him, for planning it all so perfectly, for ensuring my safety, and for giving our family the chance to heal. Catching my reflection in the hallway mirror, I saw a woman who was stronger, more joyful than she had been in years. No longer solely defined by her past roles as Frederick's wife or Daniel's mother, I saw Eleanor, ready for a life that was finally, truly my own. It was a testament to love, to resilience, and to the enduring power of truth.